For the second part of this practice program for this unit, we're going to look at the web version of this interface. This is the first time we're going to see some problems with our web version, and our web version is not going to work the same as our Windows Forms version, and we'll talk about why. And in fact, I won't have you work at all with the web version yet in the assignment. We'll just work with the Windows Form version because of some of these issues. And as we learn more about web forms in the next couple units, we'll be able to address some of these issues, but it does point these out. So again, we've got our product here, name, price, image URL, and a button. Same for the book fields. I've added a little what's called a literal element here that lets me display HTML in the middle of a page. Rather than putting it up at the top, it just makes this a little nicer. And then I've added a list box here, similar to what we had in our other things, and a button to list out the elements here. Let's look at the product button. If I click on that, very similar, code. Again, I'm creating a product here, new product, and grabbing my text fields, saving that as a sale product. Now I'm getting the HTML, but rather I used to do what is called a response write just to print that out on the page. Now I'm actually setting the text field of the literal element out there, and that will display that HTML in the middle of the page. So this element right here, its ID is lit product, and so I can refer to that right in my code and just say lit product.text and get the HTML and display it right there. I'm then adding the sales product to my array. So I've got my array, and let's look at that decoration. Up here at the top, I have an array list, and inside the page load event, I'm saying new array list. So when the page loads, it'll create a new array list. And then every time I add an element, I add that to the array list. This all looks like it should work, but it's not going to. Let's look at this button then. Here I have my list, my LB product, my list box for the products, and I've got a button. When I click on that button, I go through each element in my array, my products array, the same array that's used throughout here that I declared up above. And I just add each element, the name, and again a little formatting with the $sign and the price to that product. But let's see when I run this. So I'm going to type in a new product, a chair, a price, and an image URL. Create that product and it'll be displayed here. That works just fine. But when I list out the products, none of the products are displayed, this product. And if I try to add another object with another price, and I'm just going to skip the image URL this time. And this products, it's still not adding. So why am I losing my array list? Why aren't things going to my array lists when I click on them? Well, it gets to some of the process for web pages and how this works and where this code is run. Our code is run on the server, and so when we run this page, this code is re-executed each time. So you might think the page load event might only happen once when the page first loads, and then as we stay on that page it's not. But this page load event is happening every time I click a button and do any sort of activity there. So like again, every time I click a button, this code is actually stored on the server. So when I click the button on the web page, it goes back to the server, runs this stuff, and then reloads the page on the website and redeclares the array lists each time. So that's part of the problem. Let me run this again. So now my page load has run and I've declared a new array list in my code, but when I enter some information here about my chair and a price for my chair, now when I hit this event, what's going to happen is the control is going to be sent back to the server. The server is going to run the code and come back here, and the product page is going to be reloaded. So right now I add the element to the array list, but then I reload the page and wipe out what I've done, and so that's why the array list is wiped out and I don't see it here. So there are issues with how information is stored and where this code's run that we have to worry about more with web pages than we do with Windows Forms. So let's look at a way to fix this. And again, this goes right now beyond the scope of it, but I just want to show you it and how it works. So I've added some code in here in how I declare and use my array using what are called session variables. And we'll learn this later on in the chapter on saving state. So rather than saving some information here just on the page and the page gets reloaded, I'm going to save some information in what is called the session, which is a longer term item that's stored in on the server and information on that. So again, when I declare my array inside the page load, I'm going to also save that to the session. And again, we'll learn how to format this later on, but just this is just the code that copies this array into the session variable. I only want to do this at certain times when the array is not first created. So I do this is not post back. So I guess yes. So when I want to create this and save this to the session when the array is first created, the first time the page is loaded. And again, we'll learn more about this command later on when we get to that state information and this session stuff. This just kind of introduces it. And again, so then to use this each time, whenever I use my array, I have to copy it from the session variable or the session area into the array again and declare it. So in each one of these I have this little session copy. So again, it's not as easy to run web pages and to save this sort of state information from one click of the button to another and stuff as it is in Windows Forms. And that's one of the reasons why we'll also move to some database access stuff. So let's look at this. So here's the program running just to demonstrate that hopefully it will work. So now I can create this chair. I can also create a table. And then hopefully when I list the products, it'll list both of those items. And then I can create yet another thing like a TV. And see that added to my list. So I do see that it is possible to use arrays with this sort of web interface, but it's much more challenging. I have to use these session variables, and that's why we won't be using you won't be creating any web interfaces for this week's assignment. We'll just be working with a Windows Forms interface this week, and then we'll learn more about this when we get to the next following chapter on state variables.